this seems to be a fundamental shift in the way that public sector money is distributed. Could you explain how it's going to work and explain how this pot is going to be distributed?
Yes, the philosophy is very simple. After the cuts, there's still a lot of money on capital projects left to be spent, and on housing, transport, education, whatever it may be, skills. And so we have asked if there's a more effective way of spending that money. And the government's policy now is to encourage more local determination. They've created the local enterprise partnerships. So we have proposed that they take this money and they say to the local enterprise partnerships, private sector and local government partnerships, you tell us what you would do if you could originate the expenditure patterns, and tell us what you'd add to it if you had this public money. Now, all this is well precedented. There's a lot of experience of doing this, and there's a great deal of success achieved in doing it, because you get more money added to what the government can afford. And so we've set out, excuse me, we've set out the scale of the money. It's about £49 billion over 4 years, plus the European money, about another 9 billion, plus something like 10 billion a year that the local authorities themselves realise from capital sales. And we've said, look at all that and then devise local strategies. The idea is very simple. We're really saying we'd like to recreate something of the strength that made this country in the first place. It wasn't made by London. It was made by the great cities of England and the United Kingdom. So we're trying to re-enhance their status and their power. Government wants to do it. It's government policy to do it. There are many examples of how they're trying to do it. This is to put the whole thing into a bigger context.
So how much money will local government be losing? I mean, in effect, will Eric Pickles be waking up and thinking, I'm going to have how much of my budget will be taken away from me? Are we really just getting an extra layer of bureaucracy here?
Well, you're getting, of course, to the position where a lot of the central bureaucracy can be reduced. And, of course, it will need strengthening of the local capabilities. But the really important thing is how much extra money do you get by giving the local people the opportunity to add to what the government can afford, and how much better is the use of the money if it's originated, the expenditure, locally. See, I don't think that officials in London know how Manchester or Liverpool or Leeds or Newcastle or Plymouth want or ought to spend the money. We decide here about housing, about roads, about education, about skills, but we don't ever think about the place, the cities where this money is being spent, and we don't involve them in a partnership. I think that's a better way to do it.
So what we were saying, in effect, it was a mistake to scrap regional development agencies?
No, because they were not really local. They were great bureaucracies. You see, I don't believe that in this country people think of themselves as part of the Northwest. They think of themselves as Mancunians or Liverpudlians or coming from Preston. So creating a great bureaucracy over the whole area didn't attract any local loyalty, and it didn't actually encourage the private sector because it was all handouts. What the proposal that I'm working on encourages everybody because they have to put together local strategies in order to get the money.
You mentioned in this document elected mayors. I mean, why do you think it's a good idea? Voters have said time and again, in effect, that they don't want them.
Well, they haven't said it time and again. They were given a referendum in which very tiny numbers of people voted, and they largely voted depending on what their local councillors told them. And that's a very bad way in which to determine whether Britain should be like all other advanced capitalist economies. Everybody else in every other country of which I have knowledge has local mayors because they have leaders, people to drive the local opportunities, to speak for the local people. And where this has happened, in London, it's been a great success. In Liverpool, in Leicester, and now in Bristol, it's going to be a success. And there are plenty of examples elsewhere, but I think we should encourage more of that.
What concerns have you got that this government isn't taking growth seriously enough?
Well, I think it is. Why did they put me into a position of this report? They're taking it extremely seriously. And indeed, the latest figures indicate that the results are beginning to go their way. It's early days, don't want to get carried away. But the fact is, the government has set up my report, are interested in it, and they know the sort of things I believe in. So I have nothing but admiration for them.
How frustrated have you been that they've already been, or people from the government, number 10, have already been briefing against this report?
Well, I have no evidence of that.
Which has been happening over the weekend. There's been some concerns from the Treasury that it's been slightly off message. Is that something that you haven't seen, something you're not concerned about?
I have read every newspaper, and I have not seen an authoritative criticism that I think has any validity at all. I think the interesting thing about the present newspaper coverage is that it's wide of the mark, and that we've been extremely successful in keeping private our report until tomorrow. There's not been a single leak of the contents of this report.
Do you think the North-South divide is widening?
Yes.
And maybe expand on that for us and just explain why this report's important.
I don't think you can hold back London in order to let the rest of the country keep up or catch up. London is arguably the world's greatest city. It has huge attractiveness and will continue to have. It's in everybody's interest to let it exploit that and to attract the wealth that flows from it. But what you also should be trying to do, and my report does try to do, is to give the rest of the country the opportunity to be as effective as it possibly can without destroying the impetus of London. And my report is very detailed in how you can give to the great cities a much greater share of the decision making about the limited resources we can afford.
Just to sum up, maybe you could explain how serious the situation we are in the economy and how important this is. There are some big sums, the £49 billion pot. How important could this be if it is taken on?
Well, look, I tell you, the truth is we can continue to fall slowly behind. We won't be impoverished. We'll probably get a little bit richer. But we will not keep up with the pace setters. We will not be a world-leading power. We will not be a world-leading economy. That requires effort. In terms of the Olympic Games, 400 British citizens pushed themselves to the extreme of human endeavour for 8 years. That was long-term. That was competitiveness. That was excellence. And somehow we have to get that sort of spirit into a much wider sector of our economy and amongst a wider number of our people.
And just finally, you do mention Europe several times in this report. What is your feeling about people in the Conservative Party that might be voting against a budget, will be voting for a budget cut? What is your message to people in the Conservative Party that maybe feel we're giving still too much to Europe?
Oh, well, on the substantive issue of the moment, I think the Prime Minister is absolutely right to say to the European community, look, you can't seriously tell the Greeks and the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Irish to cut and then think you can expand. I mean, it just has no credibility. I'm totally supportive of him. And if Europe behaves like that, it will find it has an adverse effect on public opinion, which I don't want.